بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome to the online course How I Memorized the Quran. I hope this helps you in your journey of memorizing the Quran. So instead of making this course longer than needed, I decided to make it short and straight to the point. The name of this course is How I Memorized the Quran. So I am basically just showing you how I did it. You don't have to copy everything I say, but what I want you to do is to get inspiration from everything you see here and apply what you believe will work for you. But before we start, two very important things. First, your intention. Memorizing the Quran is a lifelong project and it is a lot of work. But if you're not doing it for Allah, it's not worth it. Second, there is only one secret to memorizing the Quran: regular repetition. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Read the Quran regularly. By the one in whose hand Muhammad's soul is, it escapes from memory faster than a camel does from its tying ropes." The word here is regular. This system will only help you be more efficient, but if you're not doing your revision regularly, it's not going to work. With that in mind, in the next video, I will show you an overview of how the system works, and then I will break down each point in a separate video, inshallah. So let's start. Let's look at this example. When someone learns to drive a car for the first time, they pay attention to every little thing around them. After a few weeks of driving, they improve and are now paying less attention while driving. After a few years, they might drive back home from work without even realizing how they got there. Two words: practice and attention. When you first learn to drive a car for the first time, you don't have any practice, since you've never driven before. The reason you feel overwhelmed by everything around you is because your attention level is very high. After driving, let's say, for a few years, your practice level is very high, while your attention level is very low. That's how you're able to have a conversation or pay attention to what's on the radio while driving. These three boxes represent our practice level. The higher the practice level, the darker the color. In the beginning, we start at the lightest color, and with more practice, we end up on the darker side of the table. Let's give each box a name: new, recent, and revision. The same concept applies to Surah Al-Fatiha. Since we read it at least 17 times a day in our prayers, we never make any mistakes when reciting it. It's because the practice level is very high. In the next video, we will see a mistake that most people make when memorizing the Quran and how to avoid that mistake. Let's apply what we have learned so far on this surah, Surah Al-Buruj. Let's say that we are planning to memorize it over 3 days. As you can see here, the three boxes are white since we haven't started yet. By the end of day 1, the color of the first part is gray, since it's our first time trying to memorize this part. We change the color of the first part to blue, since we are reading it for the second time on day 2. On the same day, we memorize the second part of the surah for the first time and highlight it in gray. By the end of day 3, we read the first part of the surah for the third time and we move it to the dark blue box. We also read the second part of the surah for the second time and highlight it in blue, and memorize the last part of the surah for the first time and highlight it in gray. So the first part of the surah has been repeated over 3 days, the second part has been repeated over 2 days, and the last part over 1 day only, which is the day we try to memorize it. This is where most people stop, thinking that they have completed memorizing the surah and move on to the next one. But as we can see here, not all 3 parts of the surah have the same level of practice. Our goal is to eventually highlight all parts of the surah in dark blue, which means that we have revised them enough times, indicating a high level of practice. Now, a page shouldn't take a long time to complete. This is to explain the concept and show the mistake that most people make. Memorizing the Quran is like building a house. The stronger the base, the easier it is to build more floors on top. In this case, memorizing more surah. This is one of the main reasons people give up shortly after starting. After memorizing few surahs, they feel overwhelmed and struggle to maintain the quality of their memorization, eventually leading them to give up. Now let's zoom out and apply what we have learned, but this time over many surahs instead of just one surah or one page. Here we have the list of all the surahs in the second chapter. We are starting to memorize from Surah Al-Mursalat at the bottom of the list. This is after a few days or weeks of starting. We notice that the color gray is not changing to blue as we have seen earlier. We will see why in few slides. This is after a few more days or weeks. Let's say that our plan is to memorize half a page every day. While we are memorizing new verses, we should be doing revision at the same time. Memorizing and revision should always be done simultaneously. The two arrows on the right side show that every time we complete a revision cycle, we start over again. Revision is a non-stop process. We continue doing this until we finish memorizing the whole chapter, in this case, all the surahs on this list. Now that we have finished memorizing this chapter and have been revising simultaneously, we change the color from gray to blue, as you can see here. This will make more sense in the next video when we download the Quran memorizing plan and see how to apply everything we have learned so far. To download the Quran memorizing plan, go to quranmindmaps.net and download the file by clicking Get your free copy. You will see three options. They all have the same structure. The only difference is the amount of pages you have to revise every day. So if you have time for your daily Quran program, download the 10-day plan. And if you are struggling to find time during the day, download the 30-day plan, which will give you less pages to revise every day. For this course, we will look at the 30-day plan. On the second page of the same file, you will see this. Daily memorization target. Depends on the person's ability. So here, we are not telling you how many verses or pages you should be memorizing every day. That depends on your ability. Our focus here is on the revision side. As you can see here, it is broken into three boxes that we have seen earlier. Here we are on level 1, which is the first of 30 chapters in the Quran. This is for someone who has just started memorizing the Quran. While they are memorizing the surahs in the first chapter, the revision plan shows that they have half a page of revision every day, which means that they are memorizing as much as they can while revising half a page every day. This will continue until I finish memorizing the first chapter. Once the memorization of the first chapter is completed, we move to level 2 and start memorizing the second chapter. Here we see that we move chapter 1 to the blue box, since we have been revising all the surahs in that chapter for some time. Chapter 2 will be in the gray box. Now we have two things we need to do in our revision program every day. Revising one page of chapter 1 in blue, revising half a page of chapter 2 in gray, on top of memorizing as much as we can. This will continue until we finish memorizing the second chapter. We move to level 3 once we complete memorizing the second chapter and start with the third one. Here we see that we have given chapter 1 a darker color, dark blue, and blue for the second chapter since we have been revising them for some time. The new chapter, chapter 3, will be in the gray box. Now we have three things we need to do every day. Revising one page of chapter 1 in dark blue, revising half a page of chapter 2 in blue, and revising half a page of chapter 3 in gray, while also memorizing as much as we can. If you are feeling overwhelmed by the quantity, you can do 2 boxes a day out of the 3. But make sure you keep alternating between the boxes so you wouldn't forget what you have already memorized. This will continue until you finish memorizing the third chapter. We repeat the same process in chapter 4 as well. This plan will show you what surahs are there in each box and the number of pages you have to revise every day. It starts at level 1 and finishes at the last chapter of the Quran, level 30. In the next video, we will see what we can do with the pages or surahs that we are struggling with, even though we have been revising them for some time. By looking at this table, it shows that the quality of memorization for all the surahs in the same box is consistent, which is not true. There are those surahs or even a page of some surahs that we always struggle with. Let's look at the second chapter highlighted in blue here. Here is a list of all the surahs in the second chapter. This shows that all the surahs in this chapter are on the same level when it comes to quality of memorization. A more accurate representation would look like this. Even though we have been revising this chapter for some time, we might still be struggling with the three surahs highlighted in red: Al-Insan, Al-Muddathir, and only the first page of Surah Nuh. Here is what I try to do. Every time I finish revising all the surahs on the list, and before starting another revision cycle, I go through the ones highlighted in red before starting over again. For example, let's say that we are starting our revision from the bottom of the list, Surah Al-Mursalat. In our plan, it shows that we have to do half a page of revision every day. When we reach the top of the list, Surah Al-Mulk, we are supposed to start over again from the bottom of the list. But before doing that, and in order to put more emphasis on our weakness, we go through the surahs that are highlighted in red first. In this case, Surah Al-Insan, Al-Muddathir, and only the first page of Surah Nuh. Once we are done, we start the revision cycle from the bottom of the list again. Let's say that after doing this for 3 revision cycles, we notice that we have improved our mastery of Surah Al-Insan. Now we can remove the red highlight from this surah. This is how the list will look now. The same concept applies to the 2 other boxes. We add a red highlight to the surahs that we are struggling with. Every time we complete a revision cycle, and before starting a new one, we go through the surahs that are highlighted in red first, in order to put more emphasis on our weakness. And we do this few times until we feel that we have improved the mastery of the highlighted areas. Only then we can remove the red highlight. In the next video, we will see how we can improve the consistency of our Quran revision by integrating it in our daily routine. Looking back at our example of learning to drive a car for the first time, we have seen how after driving for a few years, your practice level is very high, while your attention level is very low, and how some of us might drive back home from work without realizing how we got there. The higher the practice level, the darker the color. For example, for someone who is on level 10, they can do their revision of both the blue box and the dark blue box by listening to a sheikh and reading along while doing other activities like driving, taking a walk, doing chores, or any other activities that allows to do that. I wrote about this concept in the Quran Mind Maps newsletter, a simple change that made all the difference. Quran revision shouldn't be a struggle, but a seamless part of our daily routine. This not only helps us stay consistent, but also makes our Quran revision become an effortless part of our daily routine. Subscribe to the newsletter if you want to receive stories and tips on memorizing the Quran in your email. Some of us might struggle with similar verses when memorizing the Quran. In the next video, we will see how the Quran mind maps that I created help me track similar verses in the Quran. To get your free copy of the Quran mind maps file, go to quranmindmaps.net and download the file Quran mind maps. When you open the file, you'll find a mind map for every surah. Let's look at an example. Before I show you how to read a mind map, please remember that you don't have to memorize everything on these mind maps. These mind maps should only give you an idea of similar verses that exist in the same surah or in other surahs that you have already memorized. For example, in this mind map, you will only find similar verses that exist in the same surah or any other surahs from Surah An-Nas up to this one. This applies to all mind maps. Let's zoom out to have a better idea. Here we have 30 boxes representing the 30 chapters in the Quran. The mind map that we have just seen was for Surah Al-Waqi'ah, which is in the 4th chapter. In that mind map, we will only find two things: similar verses from the same surah and similar verses from other surahs highlighted in yellow, which is from Surah An-Nas up to Surah Al-Waqi'ah. Let's look at another example. Here we have the mind map of Surah As-Saffat. This surah is in chapter 8 starting from Surah An-Nas. As we have seen earlier, we will only find two things in this mind map: similar verses from the same surah and similar verses from other surahs highlighted in yellow, which is from Surah An-Nas up to Surah Al-Saffat. Now let's go back to the mind map from Surah Al-Waqi'ah and see how we can read a mind map. Similar verses are color-coded. For example, let's see the verses highlighted in yellow. The first one, لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما. The similar verse from Surah An-Naba, highlighted in yellow, لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا. Let's look at another example, the one highlighted in green. The first one, تنزيل من رب العالمين. The similar verse that exists in Surah Al-Haqqah, تنزيل من رب العالمين. The colors on these mind maps don't have specific meanings assigned. For example here, the color red doesn't mean that this verse is more important than the others. Colors used in different mind maps are distinct and not linked. That means if a surah has more than one mind map, let's say two different ones, the color red in one of them is not linked to the same color in the other mind map. Finally, not all similar verses in the Quran are included, only the ones that I wrote down while building this system. You can always highlight or add new ones for yourself. Please remember that you don't have to memorize everything on these mind maps. These mind maps should only give you an idea of similar verses. To integrate those mind maps into our daily Quran revision, whenever you are revising a surah, take a quick look at the mind map of that surah. Doing this will help you get less confused when reading similar verses, inshallah. Before learning how to navigate the Trello template, let's say that we have a Quran that we usually read from, and we want to apply the concepts we have learned so far. First, we would need to add 3 dividers at the end of every box or section. And to track our progress, we need to add bookmarks in each box. Finally, we would need to add page markers to highlight the surahs or pages we are struggling with. The last thing we want is to turn our Quran from this to this. We would also need to take our Quran with us everywhere we go to track our progress, which is not practical. Instead, I decided to use an application that can be accessed from anywhere, and that allows me to add these dividers, bookmarks, and page markers without making a mess. I decided to use an application called Trello. Trello is a list-making application. The only reason I decided to use it for my Quran revision is because I was already using it for my work. Now that you understand how the system works, if you find yourself overwhelmed by this application that I'm going to show you, you have the option to use a different one, or simply use the physical print of the Quran. Either way, I suggest that you watch how I use this application for my Quran revision. To get a copy of this application, go to the App Store and download Trello on your tablet or phone, or go to Trello.com on your browser. Before making a copy of the Trello template, you would need to create an account on Trello. After creating an account on Trello, go to QuranMindMaps.net and get your copy of the template. Click this link to get your copy. Click on Create Board from Template on the top. Click Create. Now that you got your copy of the template, this is how it's going to look on your computer. Every chapter of the Quran is on a separate list. The number of the chapter is on the top of each list. Under each list, you'll find all the surahs in that chapter. It starts at chapter 1 and ends at chapter 30 of the Quran. Now let's see how the Trello template would look on the iPad. To navigate the Trello board, swipe to the left or to the right. Scroll up or down to see all the surahs in every list. To open any surah, click on the surah name and swipe to the right. You will find all the pages of the surah here. To get back to the home page, click Close in the top left corner. You will also notice that all mind maps are included here. I didn't want to go back and forth to check similar verses in the Quran Mind Maps ebook. Instead, I included all of them here to put everything in one place. Before applying what we have learned so far on the Trello template, let's take a look at those concepts one more time. At the end of every box or section, we would need to add a divider. We would also need to add a bookmark in every box. We also need to add page markers for the surahs that we haven't mastered their memorization. Let's say that someone is on level 3. We would need to add divider at the end of the first chapter, another divider at the end of the second chapter, and another one at the end of the third chapter. We would also need to add 3 bookmarks, one for every box or section. Finally, we need to add page markers for those surahs or pages we are struggling with. Let's see how this would look on the Trello template. Here are the 3 dividers that we learned about earlier: revision, recent, and new. For our example of someone who is on level 3, it would look like this. We move a divider at the end of the first chapter, another divider at the end of the second chapter, and a third one at the end of the third chapter. To track our progress, we will use these 3 cards as bookmarks. This means that we are at Surah Al-Buruj in the first section, and Surah Al-Mursalat in the second section, and add Surah Al-Jum'ah in the third section. Let's say that we need to improve our memorization of these surahs: Al-Fajr, Al-Jinn, Al-Mulk, and only the second page of Surah Al-Munafiqun. This is how we are going to highlight them in red. We go to the surah and click Labels and choose Remember. We do the same with Surah Al-Jinn and Surah Al-Mulk. We also do the same with Surah Al-Munafiqun. And since we only need to work on the second page of the surah, we look for the number of that page in the Quran and type it in the description box. Let's take another example, but this time for someone who finished level 3 and has moved to level 4. The dividers will move according to the new plan. That means a divider at the end of the second chapter, a divider at the end of the third chapter, and a third one at the end of the fourth chapter. Now let's see how this would look, but this time on our phone. This is how the Trello template would look on our phone. It is the same, but on a smaller screen. We move by swiping to the left or to the right. Let's open the surah and see how it looks on the phone. Click on the surah name and swipe to the right. To go back to the home page, close by clicking the X in the left top corner. For someone who finished level 3 and moved to level 4, we move the dividers according to the plan on level 4. To move a divider, we hold the top of the list and drag it to where we want. A divider would be moved to the end of the fourth chapter, another divider would be moved to the end of the third chapter, and another one would be moved to the end of the second chapter. We can also change the place of any bookmark by holding the card and moving it according to our progress. Previously, we highlighted Surah Al-Jinn since we didn't master its memorization. After a few weeks of revision, we noticed that we mastered it, We go to the surah and click on the label Remember to remove it. To highlight another surah, we do the same. We go to the surah and click on the label Remember to highlight it. Before we move to the next video, please remember that since you understand how the system works, if you find yourself overwhelmed by this application, you have the option to use a different one, or simply use the physical print of the Quran. Here, I will show you how I am able to revise 3 chapters, which is 60 pages every day, while only needing to sit for half an hour. But before doing that, I want to remind you that you don't have to copy what I do. Instead, learn from what you see and apply what you believe will work for you. For me, I don't have a specific time during the day for my Quran revision, but my favorite time is right before or after Fajr prayer, when things are quiet. On those days, I don't feel pressure to find time during the day to complete my revision. I also use the same version of the Quran for my revision. Sometimes, different versions don't have the same page layout, which might be confusing when doing our revision of the Quran. I would also listen to the same Sheikh when doing my Quran revision. Finding someone that we enjoy listening to their recitation helps a lot in staying consistent with our Quran revision. And as you can see here, while doing my revision, I mark verses that share similarities, or ones that I usually make a mistake when revising them. In my plan, I have a chapter in every box of the 3 boxes that we have seen before. I would normally do my revision of the blue and the dark blue boxes while driving. I would listen to a sheikh and read along. I also changed the speed of the audio to 1.75 for efficiency. This leaves one chapter in the gray box that I have to sit down for and revise, which normally takes less than half an hour at a regular reading speed. So how did I end up creating this system? The only reason I created all this is because I wanted to solve a problem I had myself. I have completed memorizing the Quran, but I was struggling to maintain the quality of my memorization, especially with school, work, family, and life in general. So I wanted to start building a more efficient system. First, I decided to write down similar verses found in the Quran to improve my memorization. And to track my progress, I created the revision plan and the Trello template. As I was building the system, I thought to myself that someone else might benefit from it. And that's when I started learning how to build a website, create digital products, design an online course, among other things that allowed me to share the system with you. I really hope you found this online course useful and that it inspired you to start your journey of memorizing the Quran. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me on social media at Quran_mindmaps on Instagram and Twitter X. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter by going to quranmindmaps.substack.com. I share stories and tips on memorizing the Quran. That's it for this course. I wish you all the best with your memorization of the Quran, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.